The sea east of Okinawa was quiet, too quiet for April 1945. Beneath its still surface at a depth of 180 feet, the USS Cayuga SS-741 moved like a steel ghost through ribbons of cold current. Inside, 41 men listened to the hum of their own heartbeat against the machinery. The world above was ending. Japan's empire was collapsing. But down here, war still breathed through sonar pings and whispered orders. Lieutenant Commander Frank Delaney, 37, sat hunched over the periscope, well sleeves rolled, eyes raw from red light strain. He had been at sea for 7 months without a home port. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from repetition. Every depth gauge, every bearing, every blip on the sonar, he'd memorized their language long ago. It was his pulse now. "Range to convoy," he asked quietly. Chief Sonarman Bill Haney adjusted his headphones. "Multiple screws, sir. Merchantman light destroyer escort. Range 100 yards and closing." Delaney nodded. Japanese coastal convoy probably heading to Kyushu. He checked the clock. 02:03 hours. They'd been shadowing the formation since dusk, staying below the thermocline where sonar echoes broke apart. Above, Japanese spotters swept the sea with long silver beams. Each searchlight slice looked like a blade through the dark water, fading just before reaching them. "Prepare forward tubes 1 through 4, Delaney ordered. "Set depth, 8 feet, contact exploders. Target-led destroyer." The torpedo crew moved without words, men who had done this 100 times but never forgot the weight of it. Sweat dripped down the nose of Seaman Reeves as he locked the final latch. The sound of screws grew louder. "Fire 1, Delaney said. A hollow whoosh rippled through the hull. "Fire 2. Another pulse. 2 trails of compressed air hissed out into the Pacific. Delaney closed his eyes and counted under his breath. 1, 2, 3. A low boom rolled through the water. The Cayuga shuddered as if struck from afar. Then another. The sonar room erupted. "Hit 2 hits bow section. Secondary explosions." "Take her down," Delaney barked. Angle 20 degrees. Depth 250. The helmsman spun the wheel and the submarine angled into the blackness. Loose pencils rolled off the map table. Red lights flickered as ballast tanks filled. The pressure crept into every seam. Above them, the ocean boiled with debris and light. One destroyer, Asagumo Maru, was gone in less than a minute. The rest of the convoy scattered depth charges already dropping. The hull of the Cayuga rang like a bell as explosions rippled through the depths. "Hold her steady," Delaney murmured. "They don't know where we are yet." The sub drifted deeper into silence. Men held their breath until the air felt thick as oil. When the last echo faded, Delaney exhaled slowly. "Mark it, Mr. Haney. 1 down." The first day of their final patrol had begun. By morning, they were 50 miles south, following a trail of oil slicks and floating wreckage. Delaney stared through the periscope lens at the gray horizon, his reflection ghosting back over the sea. He had once thought victory meant survival. Now, it only meant endurance. "Captain," said Ensign Willis, stepping up beside him. "Intel said Japan's convoy lanes are thinning. We might not see another target for weeks." Delaney smiled faintly. "You'll be surprised how fast the desperate move. They think speed makes them invisible." He turned the scope a degree north. The sun broke through a line of clouds, flashing off something metallic, a glint at 12,000 yards. Or maybe not. Battle stations. The second day came with another attack, 2 cargo ships guarded by a single escort steaming toward Kagoshima Bay. At 09:30 hours, Delaney ordered a surface run under partial cloud. The Cayuga's diesel engines rumbled to life, sending black exhaust plumes into the wind. "Target bearing 085, range 4,000 yards, steady on course. We'll let them come to us." The Japanese freighters looked almost peaceful through the lens-rusted hulls, faded flag sailors walking the deck unaware of the predator beneath the horizon. One carried munitions, the other fuel drums bound for Okinawa's defense line. Delaney hesitated before giving the order. "They're still people," he muttered. The XO Lieutenant Griggs met his eyes. "So are the men on those carriers they're resupplying." Delaney nodded once. "Fair point. Fire tubes 1 and 3. The sea flinched. 2 white wakes streaked across the surface, invisible except to God and sonar. 43 seconds later, both ships erupted into fireballs. The concussion flattened the water around them, scattering flames and debris skyward. The escort began its frantic zigzag, dropping charges in wild arcs. The Cayuga dived again, running silent beneath the boiling inferno. When they surfaced that evening, Delaney wrote a single line in the logbook, April 7th. 2 cargo vessels sunk. Minimal enemy pursuit. Crew steady. He didn't mention the 50 men who'd gone down screaming into the sea. He didn't have to. The ocean kept its own records. The third day brought exhaustion. Diesel fumes clung to every corner of the hull. Men shaved in silence, ate in silence, dreamed in silence. The air smelled of sweat and machine oil. The ocean outside remained an endless gray void, featureless except for the occasional whitecap. At 1500 hours, sonar reported a formation approaching from the east. Could be a decoy, Griggs warned. Delaney studied the charts. No. Too organized. Probably another convoy evacuating civilians from Amami. He rubbed the edge of a small silver coin between his fingers, engraved with the submarine silhouette and the words, "For duty, not for show." He had made it for the crew back in Pearl Harbor, promising every man a copy if they returned alive. Only 41 were minted. "Bring us to periscope depth," he said. The lens rose through the water, breaking the surface. In its circular window appeared 3 ships, 2 transports, and a light cruiser, Hatsukaze, once proud, now limping. Delaney whispered, "God help us." The Cayuga crept within 200 yards. He lined up the shot hands, steady. Fire 1, fire 2. The first torpedo struck the cruiser midship, splitting it clean in half. The second slammed into the transport's stern, igniting its cargo hold. Flames leapt hundreds of feet high, turning the sky copper. Through the periscope, Delaney saw men leaping into the water. Some waved white cloths, others clung to floating planks. He could hear faint cries over the radio static. "Hold course," he ordered, voice breaking. "We can't surface." "Sir, they're unarmed survivors," said Haney. "I know." He turned away from the scope. The compartment was silent, except for the ticking of a wall clock. After a moment, he said softly, "Mark them. Rescue planes will come." The sub slipped beneath the burning wrecks unseen. That night, Delaney couldn't sleep. The faces in the water followed him through every breath of recycled air. He opened his log again and wrote another line. April 8th. 1 cruiser, 1 transport destroyed. Survivors sighted, could not assist. God forgive us. He pressed the coin into the paper, leaving a faint circular impression. By day 4, the Cayuga had only 2 torpedoes left. The sea was calm, deceptively so. The crew's hands shook not from fear but from fatigue. They had eaten cold rations for 3 days. The oxygen scrubbers whined louder than usual. Contact 2 destroyers bearing 021 Haney called from sonar. Delaney looked up sharply. "Range closing fast, sir. They're searching." Then they found something. He knew the Japanese Navy would be hunting them after the previous day's destruction. But the Cayuga was already committed. He drew a deep breath, steadying the tremor in his chest. "Prepare aft tubes 5 and 6. The destroyers were coming in line abreast, sweeping with sonar pings. Each pulse echoed through the hull like a heartbeat. Depth 150. Maintain silent running. The Cayuga drifted under them. The ping grew louder, then stopped. "They've lost us," Haney whispered. Delaney's lips tightened. "Good. Reverse course, bring us under their wake." He waited for the bearing to align, then spoke barely above a whisper. "Fire 5. Fire 6. Both torpedoes slipped away into darkness. 40 seconds later, the sea convulsed. 1 destroyer, the Kuremaru, vanished in a column of smoke. The other, Tatsunami, rolled violently to port, its bow splitting apart. The shockwave hammered the Cayuga's hull, knocking men off their feet. Direct hits. Both targets sinking, Haney shouted. The crew broke into muffled cheers, then fell silent. They all knew what it meant, 5 ships in 4 days, a record no one would believe, a victory no one would see. Delaney leaned against the periscope housing, breathing hard. "That's it, boys. We go home." He didn't yet know there would be no homecoming. At 1910 hours, while surfacing to recharge batteries, a distant explosion rattled the submarine. "Depth charge," Griggs asked. "Too far," Delaney replied. "Might be a minefield. Adjust course 10 degrees north." The helmsman nodded. 10 north I. The Cayuga climbed toward the surface ballast tanks venting. At 40 feet, a blinding flash tore through the aft compartment, an underwater mine magnetic. The hull groaned like a living thing breaking apart. "Seal bulkheads," Delaney shouted. Men scrambled sealing doors, fighting the rush of black water. The lights flickered, then died. The sub tilted sharply, nose up. Metal screamed against metal. "Engines offline," someone yelled. Delaney groped through the smoke toward the control panel, blood in his eyes. "Blow ballast. Get her up." Nothing happened. The air systems were gone. The pressure gauge spun wildly. In the darkness, the commander found the emergency radio. Static filled his ears. "This is USS Cayuga," he rasped. "Position north of Okinawa, under attack. We've lost propulsion. Attempting surface." No answer came. The bow began sinking faster now. Water gushed through the aft corridor. Delaney stumbled toward the periscope, well clutching the coin still in his pocket. His hand trembled as he turned it over, feeling the engraved words, "For duty, not for show." He looked around at his men, faces lit by dim emergency lights, some praying, others calm. "You've done your duty," he said softly. "Hold fast." The sub slipped deeper, groaning. At 1934 hours, the sea swallowed them whole. Above, the night returned to silence. Oil and debris floated on the waves, but no bodies surfaced. Japan never saw the submarine that had sunk 5 of its ships in 4 days. The Pacific closed its mouth and kept the secret. In Washington, months later, the Cayuga was listed as missing, presumed lost. No wreckage was ever recovered. Just a final log entry sent through garbled code, barely readable, but clear enough. 5 strikes. 1 sea. Mission complete. The message ended with a single word: seen. No one knew what it meant. Tokyo Bay, 1968. The harbor smelled of diesel and salt, though no one noticed anymore. Japan had rebuilt itself from rubble into steel and glass, but the sea hadn't forgotten what it swallowed. Beneath its surface, old war machines lay twisted in silence, waiting to be remembered. In a small, windowless office of the Maritime Safety Agency, Hiroshi Tanaka, a 38-year-old hydrographer, adjusted his glasses and squinted at the sonar prints spread across his desk. The newest survey of the Okinawa Trench showed something unusual: a smooth, elongated shape half buried in sediment, too regular to be rock, too quiet to be volcanic. He circled it with a pencil and wrote a single word: submarine. Later that evening, Tanaka met with his supervisor, Captain Morita, an old Imperial Navy veteran with a limp and a voice like gravel. Sir Tanaka began carefully. The sonar return from Sector 7401 shows an anomaly steel hull roughly 90 meters long. Morita grunted. "Could be one of ours. Possible, but the configuration doesn't match any Japanese design. It's American, a Balao class maybe." The captain frowned. "Balao class?" The U.S. Navy swept that area after the war. Nothing was reported. Tanaka hesitated, then placed an archival photo on the table, a black and white shot of an American submarine leaving Pearl Harbor in 1945. The name on the bow was clear: USS Cayuga. Morita leaned closer, his one good eye narrowing. "You think this is her?" "I believe so," Tanaka said quietly. "And if it is—" "She went down after sinking 5 of our ships." The room fell silent. The hum of the fluorescent light filled the pause like a sigh. Morita finally spoke. "You realize what you're suggesting? That the wreck of a ghost we never saw has been lying under our shipping lanes for 20 years. Tanaka nodded. "Yes, sir. And she's still watching us." Across the Pacific. Laura Kincaid, a U.S. Navy historian and daughter of a wartime signalman, received a formal request stamped Japan Maritime Safety Cooperation. The document requested American assistance in identifying a submarine wreck believed to be lost during World War II. At first she skimmed it like any routine inquiry, but one line made her stop. Designation likely SS-741. Probable identity USS Cayuga. She looked at the accompanying coordinates and felt her chest tighten. Her father, she remembered, had once spoken about the Cayuga, how its last message had ended with one strange word: seen. He never explained what it meant, only that some things stayed classified even from family. Laura turned to her colleague. "Book me on the next flight to Tokyo." The survey vessel Amakusa Maru rolled gently under a gray sky. On deck, Japanese technicians manned the winches while U.S. naval observers checked the instruments. Laura stood beside Tanaka, her hair pulled back in a wind-tossed knot, her notebook clutched to her chest. "This is where she vanished?" she asked. Tanaka nodded. "Depth 300 meters, no recorded recovery attempt." The sonar screen flickered as the transducer swept the trench. For a moment static filled the display, then the outline appeared long, slender, unmistakably human-made. The conning tower leaned slightly to port, half covered by silt. Across its side the faint curve of engraved letters caught the light. "Cayuga." The crew fell silent. Laura whispered, "She's still intact." Tanaka adjusted the gain, tracing the hull's profile. "There's damage aft an explosion, maybe a mine." "That would explain the loss of power," Laura murmured. "But look here," the bow's sealed. The men inside. They never escaped. Tanaka bowed his head. "Our records list the ships she sank. 5 in 4 days. We called it the Invisible Wolf." He hesitated before adding, "My grandfather served on one of them." Laura turned, startled. "You mean—" "Yes. The Hatsukaze. He was a machinist. He didn't make it out." She said nothing for a long moment. Then she closed her notebook and said quietly, "Then maybe it's time we both let them speak." A small submersible, the Shirazi 2, descended through blue-green light. Laura sat beside Tanaka inside the cramped cabin, surrounded by the hum of hydraulics. Outside the viewport, the world grew darker, colder, more silent. At 270 meters, a ghost appeared, a submarine lying upright on the seabed, her hull mottled with coral and rust. The nameplate was still visible, Cayuga SS 741. The floodlight swept across open torpedo doors. 5 empty tubes stared back like hollow eyes. She fired them all, Tanaka murmured. Laura pressed her hand against the glass and paid for it. They guided the submersible along the side. The metal skin shimmered under the beam, etched with scars of pressure and time. Near the control room porthole, something glinted, a small silver object wedged against the frame. "Zoom in," Laura said. The camera tightened on the object. It was a coin no larger than a $50, corroded but legible. On one side, the outline of a submarine. On the other, faint words that still burned through the rust. "For duty, not for show." Laura's throat tightened. "My God, they left their mark." Tanaka reached toward the viewport as if he could touch it. "It's strange," he said. "For years we called them our enemy, but looking at this, it doesn't feel like an enemy. It feels like a mirror," Laura whispered. They stayed there for several minutes, the lights playing softly across the wreck. Inside the sub, a shoal of fish drifted through an open hatch like wandering souls. The silence was absolute. When they resurfaced, the horizon glowed with evening light. The sea was calm, a sheet of copper beneath the setting sun. The entire crew stood at the rail, watching the waves settle. Laura removed her headset and spoke to Tanaka. "I'll request that the U.S. Navy list the Cayuga officially as located, not lost." "And Japan?" he asked. He smiled faintly. "We will not disturb her. The sea already holds her grave." Tanaka nodded. "Then perhaps we can build something above her instead." A joint memorial stood at the Maritime Peace Museum overlooking the bay. On one side of the granite slab was English, on the other Japanese. The inscription read, "To the sailors who vanished beneath the same sea enemies, once now silent together." At the dedication, veterans from both countries gathered. Some wore uniforms tight around aging shoulders. Others came in civilian suits carrying medals and memories. Tanaka stood with his mother, a white flower pinned to his lapel. Laura stood across the aisle holding a small velvet case. When the speeches ended, she stepped forward and opened the case. Inside was the recovered coin polished to silver. The inscription caught the sunlight. She placed it at the foot of the memorial. "This belonged to Commander Delaney," she said softly. "We found it near the control room. It survived when nothing else did." Tanaka bowed deeply. "Then it will rest here between our names." He reached into his pocket and withdrew another object, a rusted fragment of Japanese engine steel shaped like a small blade. "From the Hatsukaze," he said. "My grandfather's ship." Without speaking, Laura accepted it and placed it beside the coin. The two metals, American silver and Japanese steel, touched with a faint ring that lingered in the wind. The crowd fell silent. A priest offered a short prayer. For a long time, no one moved. The city lights shimmered across Tokyo Bay. Tanaka found Laura leaning on the railing watching the dark water. "You think they heard us?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "I think they've been waiting for someone to listen." He nodded. "When I was a boy, my mother said the sea keeps every voice that enters it. That's why waves never stop talking." Laura looked toward the horizon. Then maybe that's what Delaney meant when he sent that final message. Seen. Not by men, but by the sea. Tanaka considered that. And now by us. They stood there for a long time saying nothing. The wind carried the faint scent of salt and diesel, the smell of two histories finally breathing the same air. A remotely operated drone revisited the site. The wreck of the Cayuga was unchanged, resting peacefully in its cradle of silt. But the coin was gone. The camera followed a trail of disturbance in the sand until it reached the sub's conning tower. There, pinned against the steel by a small current, lay the coin and the piece of Japanese metal side by side. The inscription on the coin glimmered faintly under the deep-sea light, "For duty, not for show." And below it, the new reflection of the Japanese steel plate shone back like a reply. The sea had completed its own ceremony. Laura Kincaid stood at a podium inside a crowded naval auditorium. Behind her, projected on a screen, was the restored photograph of the Cayuga's crew before departure. 41 men smiling in sunlight. She cleared her throat. For 25 years, the story of the Cayuga was a footnote, missing, presumed lost. Now we know the truth. She carried out her mission under the most perilous conditions, and her crew never returned. But their legacy was not destruction. It was duty that crossed even the borders of war. She paused, letting the silence settle. When we found the wreck, we found not a weapon, but a message. One that read, "For duty, not for show." The Japanese people helped us recover it. Together, we built a memorial. Because history isn't about victory, it's about understanding. The audience rose in quiet applause. Some were veterans, some children of the fallen. For a brief moment, all generations felt the same heartbeat. The memorial now stands by the shoreline where the waves never stop moving. Tourists pass, children play, but sometimes a visitor stops to read the plaque. A young boy asks his father why Japan never saw the submarine. The father smiles gently. Because it wasn't meant to be seen, it was meant to be remembered. Out on the horizon, a buoy flashes every 5 seconds, a single red pulse echoing through time like a heartbeat underwater. Below it, 300 meters deep, the Cayuga rests, untouched, her hull cloaked in coral and silence. Fish drift through the open hatch. The current hums softly through the metal ribs like breath through a flute. And if one listens closely through the hum of the tide, through the whisper of history, one might almost hear the faint voice of Commander Delaney standing by. The beacon flickers once, then steadies. The ocean remains still vast, alive. And somewhere beneath the U.S. sub that sank 5 warships in 4 days still keeps her watch unseen, undefeated, and finally understood.